Gosh, that was the longest. That was the longest advert, I think,
Wow.
ever.
I think everybody wants to be on Spice FM, Ammar, and promote their business.
It sounded like it. Number of our sort of partners, so Durham and Darlington Fire Brigade. I thought that was great. Yeah, it's gosh, I feel as if I haven't seen you properly for a bit.
Oh, you've been a very busy man. You've been rolling with the big dogs, haven't you? Whilst we've been doing the daily grind, you've been chilling out with all the ambassadors and.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. We had a good time. It was busy. It just even Saturday, Jeff, I was just to talk you through the got here on the Thursday night, came in late, and then spent the day. It was choreographed. It was sort of it was pretty much orchestrated and coordinated. Martha from my office had helped out quite significantly, but it was right. We didn't want to see them. We don't want to see them. It was almost like that. So it was produced, but yeah, no, we done what we tried to do, what we could do, and on that basis, it was very successful. We had a great time. We took them everywhere. We seen everything. Everybody that met with them, I'll tell you what it is. What an incredible diplomat. I mean, like talk about switched on. As in he's got to be up there with probably one of the most significant with the most.
What was his actual position?
Sorry?
What was his actual position?
He was the ambassador to the UK.
To the UK, okay.
Yeah. So
and he's obviously based in India, but he would come to the UK quite regularly.
No, he's based in the UK. So do you know the Indian High Commission? Do you know the embassy in London?
Uh-huh.
So he is the most senior Indian representative in the UK. So every country gets an ambassador, and he's the one for here. So the one for Bangladesh, we'd met her. It's a female who's in London. I'm sure I've got her details somewhere. But anyway, it was the first time that someone as significant as him had come to the Northeast.
Oh, brilliant. I think it's a real big deal, and I'm sure he was very impressed. You went to the football as well?
You do? Yeah.
Enjoyed it?
Did you see him?
I didn't see him, but I saw the match.
All right. It was a good match. It was lucky, is what it was.
Yeah.
I think big deal that they won, like really big deal. Is the thing. But yeah. So what about you, Jeff? What's happening? How's things?
Just more of the same. Ammar, just the daily grind, trying to keep on top of everything, but it's very challenging at the moment because Ammar, the cost. Honestly, we have no control of one of our utility bills in a particular restaurant because we're part of a bigger building. And they've just put the bills up by 500%.
Sorry, who have?
The portion that we pay to the landlord, it's gone up by 500%, and they're it's not an argument. They're simply saying that, well, when our old contract finished, we're on a new contract, and it's just crazy. And I just think that these are fundamental, huge, kind of massive changes in your business plan that all of a sudden a price of something, one of your suppliers, goes up by 500%, which is just incredible. And maybe if we can ride it out, but you worry about the general business around the country, because how many businesses are going to be able to absorb that kind of increase, and what's going to be the consequences of that? And I think that's like the real worry moving forward, as more and more contracts come to an end, and I think it's just going to be so challenging. And on top of that, I didn't realize that we had a Labour government in power. I thought there were Conservatives after this budget. I mean, what's going on? But Conservatives are supposed to be good for business. Have they like changed who they are as a party?
Why do you think or suggest that?
Well, growing up, Ammar, obviously the idea was Labour was benefit the labourers effectively. But the Conservatives, because they were kind of a bit more well-to-do, posher people, they've got a few quid in their bank. They kind of had policies that benefited themselves. I'm talking in a general nutshell, that they have policies that were better for business because they were in business themselves. So they kind of did things that would favor themselves. But all of a sudden, I mean, the tax increases under the Conservative government, I think, is just horrendous.
It's yeah, I don't know what to say.
I mean, the budget, Ammar, maybe at some point you can probably go through the things that.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at the details. I'll pull up my briefing note that I obviously get, and I'll let's see. Let's see. Anyway, good morning, listeners. You're listening to Ammar and
Jalf,
live on our weekly radio show.
Each week we bring some views, news, and one or two clues from the business world.
Asian Business Connections aims to connect, support, and promote the Asian and wider communities.
And we'll be talking shop Friday. They're not just corner shops. Whether you're looking to start a business, have an existing business, or you just want to talk business, we can help.
Can help. You can help. So let's have a look at what has gone on. So with regards to the budget, so apparently it was a budget for growth, and things like, so let's just pull up the detail, Jalf, of this. So the focus was apparently on removing barriers to work, so reforms to childcare, which will see expanded free care and subsidies. The challenge with some of that, Jalf, is that there's a general election coming up next year, isn't there? So by the time some of these things come into force, they might be reversed.
Well, but how's that benefiting the businesses?
Okay. So the childcare costs, obviously, if people are getting out with childcare costs, then you would expect to see more people ready, willing, and able to get to work. More people, sort of having that flexibility and not worrying too much about their own costs, and that then should transcend into and onto businesses. Personal tax allowance was already fixed at the current level, so you're not getting any tax benefit from a personal allowance perspective. So there's no increase in personal allowances, even though the cost of living and inflation and all of those surrounding costs have increased quite significantly. The the marriage allowance permits certain couples where neither party pays tax in a year at a rate other than the basic or immediate rate to transfer 1,260 of their personal allowance to their spouse or partner. So the marriage allowance reduces the recipient's tax bill by up to £250. Tax bands. So the basic rate of tax is 20%. The band of income taxable at this rate is £37,700. Once again, the basic rate band is frozen up until April 2028. Which is interesting. The national insurance contributions of our limit profits limit will remain aligned to the higher rate threshold at 50,270 for these years. The point at which individuals pay the additional rate will be lowered, right? So currently, you pay the additional rate, not the higher rate. You've got a higher rate. You've got the standard rate, you've got a higher rate, you've then got a additional rate where it's nearly for every penny you earn, you're giving sort of 50% or whatever it is away. That's as well as all of the other taxes associated with everything else. So the additional rate is lowered from 150k a year to 125.
Okay.
Okay, tax on dividends. So tax on savings income. Savings income is income such as bank and building society interest. The savings allowance applies to savings income, and the available allowance in a tax year depends on the individual's marginal rate of income tax. But broadly, the basic rate of tax, taxed at up to the basic rate of tax, have an allowance of £1,000. For higher rate taxpayers, the allowance is £500. No allowance is due to additional rate taxpayers. So you're qualifying for a 0% starting rate of tax benefit or allowance. Tax on dividends. Currently, the £2,000 of dividends is chargeable to a tax at 0%, i.e. the dividend allowance. This will be reduced to £1,000.
Ammar, you know that used to be £50,000 a year or something, didn't it? It probably wasn't more than that back in the day, but it was. I mean, how disgraceful is that? That's just you might as well take it off because it's not doing anything.
Yeah. So let's have a look. Employment, national insurance contributions. The government will increase the hourly national living wage and the national minimum wage. So it will become £10.42 for 23-year-olds and over.
Jesus, that's like, is that not like £1 per? It's like £1 per person, isn't it?
Yeah.
Per hour. Is that not £9.50 at the moment?
It's £10.18 for 21 to 22-year-olds, £7.49 for 18 to 20-year-olds, and £5.28 for 16 to 17-year-olds. £5.28 apprentice rate for apprentices under 19 and those 19 and over in the first year of apprenticeships.
Jesus.
This represents an increase of over £1,600 to the annual earnings of a full-time worker on the national living wage. So it's great for workers, but for business owners and employers, that's just such an increased burden, isn't it?
I think the levels are huge. I don't think those levels, I'm pretty sure if you compare that to previous increases, I'm sure that is at a much higher percentage than what it's ever been before. Because that's almost a kind of a 10% increase, isn't it? I mean, when you're fighting to give nurses a 1% increase, but yet you're putting that up by 10%. Because I'm sure it's 9.50 at the moment.
So enterprise management incentives, the measure make changes to simplify EMI, so enterprise management incentives, when companies grant EMI options on or after the 6th of April, existing granted before that have not been exercised will also benefit from the changes. Firstly, it removes the requirement for the company to set out within the option agreement the details of any restrictions on the shares to be acquired under the option. Secondly, it removes the requirement for the company to declare that an employee has signed a working time declaration. And from the 6th of April, the government will extend the deadline for notifying an EMI option from 92 days following the grant to the 6th of July following the end of the tax year. Business, so corporation tax rates. This will mean, as of April the 23rd, corporation tax will increase to 25%.
It's preposterous, man. That used to be 18%.
The 19% rate will become a small profits rate payable by companies with profits of £50,000 or less. Companies with profits between 50 and 250,000 will pay tax at the main rate, reduced by a marginal relief, providing a gradual increase in the effective corporation tax rate. In addition, bank corporation tax surcharge changes will proceed, meaning that from April 2023, banks will be charged an additional 3% rate on their profits above 100 million. The rate of diverted profits tax will increase from 25 to 31% for banks. Capital allowances, the super deduction regime, which gives a 130% enhanced first capital allowance to companies on the purchase of qualifying plant, comes to an end on the 31st of March. Instead, the government has announced full expensing 100% first year allowance, which allows companies to deduct the cost of qualifying plant and machinery from the profits straight away with the no expenditure limit. Qualifying expenditure will include most plant and machinery as long as it is unused and not second-hand, but will not include cars. Full expensive will be effective for the acquisitions on or after the 1st of April. The 50% first year allowance for other plant and machinery, including long life assets and integral features, full expensing, and a 50%. The annual investment allowance available to both incorporated and unincorporated business. It gives a 100% write-off of certain The limit has been 1 million some time, but was scheduled to reduce to 200,000 from April 2023. Government has announced that the temporary will become permanent and the proposed reduction will not occur. There's some benefits there, some changes to research and development. There's making tax digital, accounting periods that are not aligned to tax years, simplification measures for small businesses, investment zones it mentioned, free ports, seed enterprise investment scheme will be able to raise up to 250k, be increased to 350k. The treatment of payments to farmers, capital gains, CGT, there is still potential to qualify, no changes to the current rate of capital gains tax. The rate remains at 10% to the extent that any income basic, and then it increases and increases, and inheritance tax, other matters, back to work, so there's some support there. VAT registration, deregistration will not change, staying at 85 and 83 respectively. Changes to VAT penalties, obviously that's going to increase, understandably.
Why is that understandably?
Well, obviously it's not. Sorry, there was some cynicism, some sarcasm there, because it's all about making more money, isn't it?
Well, you're late by one day. They just hit you with a 5% fine or whatever, and then there's like constant. You missed this, there's a fine. You missed this, there's a fine. I mean, you miss it by a day, and then just hit you with a fine.
Yeah. Anyway, plastic packaging tax.
Jesus.
You've got a lot of plastic packaging, haven't you?
Sorry?
Do you have plastic packaging?
No.
Okay.
But you have good plastic, don't you? Which probably is exempt from that.
don't know. I don't know what good plastic is, but
Yeah. Yes, it's all very, very. I think it's very murky. I think it's very disappointing. I think we haven't really recovered from anything. Everything keeps on. The walls do start to cave in when everything that's happened in the last 3 years or so. I think it's been the biggest. It's probably the biggest changes that's happened in the business world for many, 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 many years. Because in 2008 they said there was this recession, but I think this is far more challenging than what it was in 2008, because just simply of all the goods going up ridiculously in cost, and obviously down to the you had Brexit, you had the pandemic, then you have the war, you have all the energy issues. Tie all of those things in, Ammar, and it's a very, very challenging time for the business world, but it is what it is. I mean, we can't do anything about what the government does. We have to just adapt our businesses and make sure that we're able to deal with the changes that are forced upon us and do the best we can within that framework.
yes, I agree. The challenge, however, is that sadly, larger institutes and organizations will just keep passing the costs on, won't they?
Well, the larger institutions will just set up their businesses in other countries and they'll save a whole load of tax as they do. And no one's going to ever go and try and look into that, because it's just how it is. The big corporates run the governments effectively. So I mean, that's what they're going to do. And the little people who were we were led to believe all those years ago that the small businesses are the people that keep the economy going, because each small business employs 30 people, 20 people, 10 people, 50 people, 100 people. And they are the basis of a sound economy. If that is the case, then the support is not really there as it used to be. Or the taxes keep on going up and up and up, and everything's taxable. We're gonna have to pay tax to breathe shortly, I would have thought.
No, it's shocking, isn't it? Is what it is. It's I must admit, the state of the economy and the impact of cost of living is just increasing. And when I talk about organizations are just passing them on, so whether that is on our utility companies, whether that is or banks or whatever that is, as soon as a bank gets charged on the profits, they're just going to pass that on, aren't they? As in, they'll just reduce the profits, increase the costs, and pay out the dividends.
Of course. And then the situation with the banks. I mean, when you think about it, logically, a bank is a private business. Now, should a bank be private if we are putting our savings? We don't have any other options in today's society to put all of our earnings to go into a bank. Now, if that bank comes under threat, like the Credit Suisse Bank, and then the bank in, what's happened to the bank in America, which has just collapsed, something in San Francisco or something, one of those. There's a bank that's just gone bust. It was big news. Now, how can our savings get busted? Should that not be protected? And there is a level of protection that's there, but then in some instances there isn't the protection.
Why? What do you mean by that? So explain that.
Well, so let's say when in 2008, when there was that whole issue with Northern Rock and everyone was standing outside because they're thinking that the bank's going to go bust, right? And we're going to lose all of our savings. There was big queues, but then the government stepped in and they guaranteed that bank's money is going to be secured. Okay. Can you just get Paul to move? Thank you. But the thing is, that should never be the case at any point anyway, because our savings, our monies, it should go into a pot. It should go into a pot, and that pot needs to always be secured, always. And sometimes it's not the case, because a lot of people have lost a lot of money in this bank that's gone bust in America. Now, what if that happens in the UK?
No, but the point is, apparently they haven't. And that's why both the Fed and the Bank of England have stepped in. There was enough assets in the bank.
It needs moving.
There were, and there are enough assets, for. So I don't believe. I mean, basically, so Silicon Valley Bank, it's a regulated, registered banking entity. Everyone's the concern last week was that in any bank, your deposits are underwritten by the Bank of England up to £85,000.
Yep.
So my suggestion, if you're fortunate to have money, is to spread it across several accounts, isn't it?
If you can open several accounts these days.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I get that, but as in, that's what my suggestion and advice.
Yes, but if you look into it a bit deeply, though, why is another private organization? Why is the regulation allows them to invest our money into these type of different investments, and then they put it all at risk? They make these decisions. Let's say we've got 150 grand in our bank. They make decisions, and they lose that money, and then we're the ones that have to lose our lifetime savings. This should not be allowed. The regulation shouldn't be in place for that to happen. There was this thing which was the gold standard, which they took away in 1973, the Bretton Woods Agreement, where if your money was in the bank, it was secured against gold, so you knew that you had a tangible asset in that bank, and the bank would have to secure your money based on gold. So if they want to invest, if they want to did whatever with your money, you can still pull your full money out. But they've changed all of these regulations, and they've made the banks high risk businesses with people's lifetime savings. Surely no one should be able to. I appreciate these days you can't have your savings in your house, but then it's at risk when it's with somebody else's hands, when the regulation isn't there to protect your money fully.
Well, listen, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I'm just sort of highlighting that it's incredible that the banking industry, hundreds of millions of pounds of shares and value have been written off banks globally this week because they aren't as secure as they could or should be, which is a bit concerning, because that's where we're being forced to keep all of our money. And then those risky banks, like, for example, Silicon Valley Bank had started hedging and lost a bunch of money by gambling people's money. That is a matter of fact. However, I believe I don't know for certain, but I don't know for certain, but they have enough assets to be able to underwrite the deposits, and that is why both the Fed in America and the Bank of England, so HSBC have bought the bank, they've took the bank over, everybody's money is allegedly okay. I don't know how certain that is, but I couldn't imagine HSBC taking on a bank unless it was able to deal with all of their deposits. But I mean, going back to, whilst I made a suggestion personally, you may want to keep money in several bank accounts. As a business, that is really, really challenging, and it's very costly. And the vast majority of businesses that were using Silicon Valley Bank were tech businesses. So they'd made lots of money over the years, or a lot of them are early start where they've done investment rounds. So they've gone out, they've raised a few £1 million or a few $1 million. That money's in the bank. That enables them to develop and to scale their business, their applications, their technology, and they're paying for all of the services. They've got lots of employees, they're doing all of these things. So it just simply is not feasible to have lots of bank accounts, is the thing. And not dismissing your point around whether you can even open a bank in this day and age. That's part of the issue and challenge. But yeah, it's a very, very scary time for businesses.
Yeah, I think it's great to have all of these budgets and all of these policies, but fundamentally, the banks, the society is dependent on a private group of people, because the banks, they're owned by private individuals, and they have such a hold and a grip on today's society. It's incredible. If let's say that a bank decides not to let you open a bank account tomorrow, and you can't open a bank account anywhere, so what are you going to do with yourself? So the bank is.
I think you're absolutely, one of the biggest challenges around banking, bank accounts is the criteria to open bank accounts has become far more stringent. And if your credit rating and history isn't 100%, or if they can't identify you, they don't then go, all right, let's work with you and see what, let's talk to you about this. It's simply a case of computer says no. And given the fact that, cash has been all but abolished, generally speaking, it's the poorer, the less fortunate that are more hard done by. And I don't just mean that from a personal perspective. Those people, those tradesmen, those people, small businesses who are just trying to earn a living, some of those are lifestyle businesses. It is painful. It is very painful. Don't deny that. And actually, something needs to give. People need support. And there needs to be a bit more consideration. The larger businesses that have hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds in the bank, well, obviously, every bank wants them, right? So it's like, how much have you got? Are you transferring an account? Yes. How much money have you got? Well, I've got like lots of money. And it's like, okay, great. And it's the same thing with those that make the policy. They don't experience the hardship.
Yeah. Ammar, then one thing that I've been trying to get my head around, we talked about this probably a decade ago and we didn't act on it. I've been getting to get my head around what Bitcoin is and trying to understand, why it was created, and I'm reading up on it, and I've only read a little of this book to get information, and the understanding is at this stage of the knowledge that I've built is that Bitcoin was actually built as a currency alternative where your money is there with it's there at a particular place now, and it's your own money where no one can come and touch it, look at it. You can't. It's like not like the banks where they can say, "Well, I'm not going to open your bank account," and then all of a sudden, or let's say that bank goes bust, your money goes bust with it. I think it's kept in a place where it's private, it's highly secure. No one knows how much you've got in there. It's only you know yourself. It's not controlled by the government. It's so I think they've created as a platform where money could possibly be a bit safer than these traditional banks. But it's just a matter of, I'm still a bit concerned that currently the shares of Bitcoin are so high, like $20,000 or something per share, which is just unbelievable. But
I think there's the challenge with all of these things, Jeff, is there's a time and a place to get involved. And sadly, some of the biggest Bitcoin operators have committed fraud. They've run away.
I'm switch. Yeah. Time to move it. He knows what to move it to. Yeah.
They've run away with billions of pounds worth of people's money. Jeff?
What Bitcoin have?
Yes.
Okay.
So last year, one of the biggest Bitcoin operators, had who lots of people had invested in, so there's Bitcoin, and then there's a platform. So the Bitcoin is consistent, as in this is the Bitcoin, and there's probably 2 or 3 of the most popular ones. And the challenge with it is lots of people created Bitcoins, and you can mine Bitcoins. It takes a lot of energy. So it's not just about the transactional. Basically, the benefits of Bitcoin is there's a ledger there. So you've got I owe Jaff £1, right? Jaff, I pay you that £1, and it transfers to you. You now have that £1, right? I'm calling it a pound. It's not a pound. It's a digital transaction. Unlike money, where banks and governments can just print it, they can print as much of it, and it can be worth X one day and it devalues the next day. The point around a Bitcoin is it should always retain and maintain its value. It shouldn't be open to flux. However, that slightly changed because of all of the people piling in, and a bit like stocks and shares, the more people buy, the higher the value, and as soon as people start selling, it devalues. So, I think there is a future for Bitcoin. As to whether it's right here, right now, don't know. I think there was an opportunity when we 10 years ago spoke about this, and actually we were even considering buying it at that time. And how foolish were we? So
it was probably like $10 a Bitcoin or something at that time.
It wasn't even that, Jeff. It wasn't even that. I remember the Sunday Times article that I brought in at the time, and it talked about, the article wasn't about the value of Bitcoin or whatever else. It was around who had created it, and it was some guy called Satoshi Tomi or whatever. So people still don't know who created Bitcoin, right? That's what's crazy, is someone somewhere came up with this idea, mined lots of coins, put them in there, hid them all over the world, and created a new digital monetary economy. It is crazy. But in all honesty, I think, I think it's, you need to explore. You should explore. You should understand. But I think you need to be cautious, and like anything, don't be a sheep. Well, you can if you want.
I don't think I am a sheep.
Well, no, but as in, I don't know whether you are, you're not.
I'll have 2 vaccines and 2 boosters.
I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know that lots of people follow others and fail. Right? The most successful people generally follow themselves and their gut and succeed, generally, right? So in doing that, What you need to do is what you think is right for you at your point in time by undertaking research and testing it, right? So if you can afford, and you know, I'm just sort of hypothesizing here, but if you can afford sort of 10K, 20K, 100K, and you can afford to lose that, right? As in, if you can, you know, this is a serious, genuine conversation. If you can afford to lose some money, then it's worth a risk, right? And that's the bottom line, because that's what you're doing. You're taking a risk. It's the same thing, you know, as in, I mean, gosh, look, Jeff, things like pensions, things like all of these type of things, right? You either take a steady state. Do I want a 2, 3, 4% return on my pension, you know, over 20, 30 years? You know, ultimately, that then means it's more around what you put in as opposed to the return that you're going to get. But over 20, 30 years, you know, it accumulates, it'll be all right, you've got a pot. But if you, and when you take out a pension, they'll ask you, do you want to do this, do that, do that? And in life, my suggestion, although I'm not a legal or a financial advisor, so please don't take anything that I say and execute it. You know, all liability, responsibility, and accountability is not for me. Anyway, and this is just a general joke show. Joke show? Joke show. Radio show. So my point is in life, what you need to do, ideally, is de-risk a big chunk of your money, right? So you go, all right, I've got £100 here. Out of that, I could probably afford to lose £20, right? Like as in, and consequently, with 20%, I can take some risks. And you know, those risks, they're really risky, but as a consequence, the bigger the risk, the bigger the return, right? And that's a bit like business. The bigger the risk, the more you do, the bigger the return. Then 30%, you don't want to take as risky, but you know, it's medium risk. So ideally, hopefully, you'll not lose all of that. And then the 50% is low risk. You don't want to take any risk with it. You just want to keep it. And you know, if you get 2, 3% return on it, fine. And that's how you should look at when you look at, you know, whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's investments or whether it's stocks and shares or whatever it is. And look, Jeff, if you think about, right, because and this is the part of it. I do a lot of analysis. I also look at general economic environmental factors. And I had said that the growth spurt and trajectory of tech firms, right? So all of the technology firms had propped up all of the stock markets globally over the last 2.5, 3 years, right? So Apple shares, Microsoft shares, Zoom shares, all of these companies, you know, Google, everyone everywhere, they'd just grown because everybody was using the tech. But we are creatures of habit. So, you know, 2 years ago, 120,000 people employed overnight across all of these tech firms, right? As of January this year, 160,000 people being made redundant from all of these tech firms. Right? Over the last 10 years, the banks have seen a steady increase, right? After the 2009 financial crisis, 2008 financial crisis, there was all of these checks and balances put in place to make sure banks operated, they were secure, they couldn't go bust, right? We now, and some of the profits that banks have seen over the last few years are just like incredible. In NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland was primarily owned by the taxpayer. It was bailed out. They've managed to reduce how much, increase all of the profits. One of the best performing banks going. How do they make their money? Through our money.
No, we keep on investing. Like they invested and invested and invested in so many different times.
No, listen, it's dead simple, Jalf, isn't it? It's like you've got £1 million sat there. I say to you, I'm going to give you 2%, 3% interest on your £1 million. Right? And then you want to borrow £1 million. I say I'm going to charge you 10%.
Yeah. But that £1 million that's sat in their bank.
It's not theirs, is it?
That's the whole thing. If I've got £500,000 in my business bank account, well, they're investing that money in all of these different places, making loads of money from it, and we're getting nothing. But then, if anything happens,
still charging you for the privilege,
and we lose the money if anything happens to their bank, and the government give us £85,000, and we lose the rest. I mean, what on earth? How on earth? That doesn't seem legal at all to me.
Well, it is if you're a bank or a.
But it just totally doesn't make any sense. That's why, if you think about it, Ammar, just very simply, logically, how on earth did that policy even come into fruition? It's got to be done because it's so favorable to the banks. That's why when you think that the banks are ruling the ministers, I think I understand why. Because no minister is going to be able to change that into a sensible law by saying that no, you cannot. The people that's their money. That money must be secured against a parameter, which is, let's say, something which is intrinsic. Secure it against gold. They moved it away from that. At least then we had security. That yes, our money is there, it's secure. We're never gonna lose it. And what are we supposed to do as a society? Put our money in our homes? Well, it's all electronic anyway. So we can't. Previously, we could, your security was your funds is in your house in a safe or whatever it may be. But all of those things have changed so much. Either way, I think, like you said, Ammar, we have to be very, very careful about how we manage our finances moving forward, because whatever happens in America always seems to happen here later on. So I'm just wondering, is there going to be some other banks? There is the Swiss bank, Credit Suisse, is that right? They're in big trouble. And
yeah, because they misstated things.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is these are still businesses, right?
Yeah, and apparently a lot of people in Switzerland have taken their money out of that bank.
Yeah, and that's so what happened with Silicon Valley Bank wasn't that they didn't have enough assets. So legally, and I don't know this, but there isn't any suggestion of fraud or misappropriation here. What had happened was they'd made some investments, and those investments hadn't come off, so they'd lost a bit of money. But from a regulatory perspective, you've got to have sort of X amount of cover, like equity, liquidity in the bank. And people got wind of some of those losses, and everybody went to the bank and pulled all the money out. Right? So everybody started taking their money out, and that is what caused them an immediate issue. The assets are like, what has the bank underwritten? So if you imagine, the vast majority of the property in the UK is owned by a bank somewhere, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So the vast majority of property in the UK is owned by a bank. So that then means if everybody went to the bank and took their money out, the bank would have to liquidate some of those assets to be able to realize those returns. And that's how the bank operates. So I don't think there was anything untoward, so to speak, other than a bit of bad luck, to put it bluntly. You know, and that just demonstrates, though, the power of people. So whilst we sit here and go, you know, this is shocking, it almost feels illegal that organizations and institutions operate in this way, with careful coordination and or fear, it doesn't take much to bring them down, does it?
Well, I mean, that's the whole vulnerability. If the banks can be so vulnerable, that means society is so vulnerable, because society is dependent on the stability of the banks, because they've got every single person's money, whether it be a mortgage, whether it be their earnings, it's all sat there under their jurisdiction, under their control. And that is, I mean, I think the banks should be the people's banks. The people should own the banks.
Yeah. The Bank of Britain. Well, let's create one.
People's Bank of People's Bank of Newcastle.
I think
People's Bank of England.
I think that's what we do.
That's what it needs to be. So, but it is very.
What's the latest? What's the latest?
Latest in what? As in
business,
just generally football.
What's the sentiment on the street?
I think generally people are still, whilst we've talked about a lot of doom and gloom that's happening around the world, but I must say that locally, from what I see, people aren't probably, maybe they're just not bothered, or they're just not too much aware of everything that's going on, but they're kind of getting on with life. I think the city centre is quite boisterous. It's busy. The football makes a massive difference. There is still a good feel-good factor in the city. I think the leisure and hospitality is all doing okay. I think retail is doing fine. Phoenix and stuff look busy. So overall, I think it's good. But again, you know, the way that the city centre changes, that's very worrying also. But there is development, Ammar. There's obviously that Pilgrim Street development. I think that's ready to open in April. The Reuben building right on the corner of the roundabout. The other one, which is going to be the new HMRC building, the other development in the old Odeon, I think that's just plodding away. I think that'll probably, you know, it's a huge development. That probably a good couple of years away. But there is development in the city centre. I think the dynamic of the city centre is going to change quite a lot. So overall, on the ground, everything looks fine. Behind the scenes, obviously, we've touched upon some things. But I guess the way forward is to continue, keep your heads down, but just be a bit cautious of any type of financial meltdown, and make sure that your funds and your resource, your kind of your assets are protected the best that you can. That's the only thing that we can say at the moment.
Amazing. And football-wise?
Football-wise, we've got Nottingham Forest tonight. It's kind of a must-win game before the international break. If we do win, we get ourselves up to 47 points, still remain in 5th position, a point behind Tottenham. But we have a game in hand in Tottenham, and we're yet to play them at St James's Park. So top 4, Ammar, is in our hands, but we still have quite a few games left, and things can change. But if we can somehow get into top 4, it's going to be, the turnaround in the city is going to be phenomenal, in terms of the players that we will be able to attract, and being in Champions League is our kind of target, and that would be phenomenal.
Oh, and we need that. We definitely and desperately need that. So yeah, great. Coming up to the end of the show, Jalf, Asian Business Connections Curry Club, 30th of March, at the Kingston Park 101 Regiment, and we'll be back next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.